Hello, I'm Cheryl Kane Piasecki, Senior Instructor with OG's Institute for Ethics in Government.
And I am Melba Melton, Assistant Counsel in OGE's Ethics, Law, and Policy Branch. And welcome to part 2 of our series on 18 USC 208B1 waivers. In today's module, we are focusing on drafting and organizing your waiver.
Now, one purpose of 208 waivers is to document an agency's legal determination. That, however, is not their only purpose. Waivers should be drafted with all end users in mind, including the employee recipients who must follow them and members of the public who request them. So to that end, agencies should draft clear waivers that provide employees with unambiguous notice of what they may and may not work on, and also that provide the public a thorough and transparent justification for the agency's decision to grant a waiver. Now, of course, to draft clear and thorough waivers, proper organization is key.
And there are some important things to keep in mind before you start drafting. We are going to discuss some key threshold considerations for B1 waivers, statutory and regulatory requirements for B1 waivers, how to organize your B1 waiver, and some helpful tips and tricks from OGE about things you should and should not do when drafting your B1 waiver.
But before we jump into the details, let's take a moment to address a few threshold considerations that we also raised in part one that we think you should think about before you begin drafting a 208B1 waiver. First, is there another remedy that would resolve the conflict completely? Could, for example, a regulatory exemption under 5 CFR Part 2640 apply? These exemptions in Subpart B of 2640 apply automatically, and where they apply, they eliminate all or some of the disqualification requirements in 208A. If not, can the employee recuse completely from the matter or be reassigned? Where an employee's participation isn't indispensable, you might consider whether recusal or removal from a matter may actually be preferable to the issuance of a waiver, given that it completely eliminates the conflict and thereby fully protects the integrity of the government matter involved. Can the employee divest their interest or resign from a conflicting outside activity? In cases where divestiture of the disqualifying financial interest is feasible, it's often the best possible solution because the agency gets the benefit of the employee's participation while completely foreclosing any possibility that a financial interest will affect the integrity of the employee's service. Now, once you decide that a waiver is the preferred remedy, you might still consider whether there are limitations you can place on the scope of the waiver that can balance the agency's need for the employee's service on the one hand with the goals of the statute and any appearance concerns the public might have on the other. Some typical limitations include, for example, limits on the type of matters to which the waiver applies, or limits on the work the employee is allowed to perform on any particular government matter. So now that we've highlighted some things you should consider before beginning to draft a B1 waiver, let's take a look at what a B1 waiver actually requires. So the requirements for all 208B1 waivers are outlined in the statute and at 5 CFR 2640.301A. When you initiate your consultation with OGE, these are the elements we will be looking for to ensure that the statutory standards are met. First, the waiver must be issued in writing by the government official responsible for appointing the employee to their position. Now, this authority can be delegated and oftentimes is to the designated agency ethics official. Second, the waiver must be issued before the employee takes any action in the matters covered by the waiver. A waiver cannot, I repeat, a waiver cannot be given for conduct that has already occurred. Third, the employee must fully disclose to the person with the authority to issue the waiver the type and amount of their disqualifying financial interest and the nature and circumstances of the particular matter or matters involved. If the employee fails to make a full disclosure of all the relevant information, this can jeopardize the validity of the waiver. Fourth, the waiver document itself should clearly describe the disqualifying financial interest, the particular matter or matters to which it applies, the employee's role in the matter or matters, and any limitations on the employee's ability to act in those matters. Finally, the waiver document itself must make it clear that the waiver is based on the applicable statutory standard. In other words, the waiver must include the agency's determination that an employee's disqualifying financial interest in a particular matter is not so substantial to affect the integrity of the employee's services to the government in that matter. So now, Melba is going to show you how to organize your draft waiver to ensure that all these requirements are in fact met. Melba?
Thank you for covering those waiver requirements, Cheryl. With the requirements for B1 waivers in mind, let's take a look at how they show up in a waiver. To do that, we are going to take a step back and look at a model waiver outline to see how it should be organized, and then discuss each section individually so that you have a better understanding of the content of your waiver. Don't forget, if you have questions along the way, please take a look at the resources we provided you with during our last training module, which was an overview of 208B1 waivers. Now, let's get started. Before we dive into the individual sections of a B1 waiver, I want to provide you with a big picture overview of how a B1 waiver should be organized so you can visualize where we are going on this drafting journey. So, take a moment to note some of the information contained in each section of this model waiver outline. Following this outline or a similar one will facilitate your consultation with OGE. Now that we have covered the required elements of a 208B1 waiver, the next topic will be how to organize your B1 waiver. However, before we dive into organizing your waiver, I want you to recall our discussion in Training Module 1 about OGE's role being like that of a passenger in a car that the agency is driving. So, as you know, OGE is very invested in this car, making it safely to its destination. So as we discuss drafting the B1 waiver, I want you to keep in mind that these are the elements your passenger, OGE, will be looking for when you submit your waiver to us for consultation. We begin our drafting journey with the introductory paragraph. There are three main components of an introductory paragraph. First, an actual introduction to the document, which is the sample language you see on this slide. This paragraph contains information about what the document actually is, a waiver, who it's for and their position, and what the basis is for issuance. Number two, the introductory paragraph should also contain a statement of the 18 USC 208B1 standard. And lastly, the agency's initial recommendation. We recommend beginning your waiver with a statement of the basic prohibitions of 18 USC 208A and the legal standard in 18 USC 208B1. Stating the general prohibition and the legal standard for waiver of the prohibition is helpful because it provides context for the agency's assessment of the facts and its decision to issue the waiver. Because the waiver is both a legal document and a document of notice, stating the obligations and waiver authorities informs the employee of the expectations of their conduct and the limit of permissible actions under the waiver. The introductory paragraph should also provide a statement that the waiver determination is based on the facts and circumstances as provided by the employee seeking the waiver. It is very important to remember that a valid 208B1 waiver is based on a full disclosure of all information relevant to the disqualifying financial interest and the nature and circumstances of the particular matter at issue. This is why it is imperative for you to outline the facts that the waiver is based on. Okay, we have discussed the elements that should be included in your introductory paragraph. Now let's discuss the next section of your waiver, a description of the employee's official duties. After discussing the statutory framework for providing a 208(b)(1 waiver, you should describe the employee's position at the agency and their relevant duties in as much detail as possible. These details are very important because they explain why the employee needs to participate in a particular matter affecting their financial interest and whether the disqualifying financial interest should actually be waived. For example, if the employee's role is administrative or advisory and they do not have any decision-making authority, it may be easier to justify the issuance of a waiver. Next up, discussing particular matters and the employee's role in your B1 waiver. It is critical that you identify what the particular matter actually is and what the employee's role would be in that particular matter. This is a key part of the 208 analysis. So, after a general discussion of the employee's duties, you should provide a description of the particular matter or types of particular matters that are the subject of the waiver. Next, describe the employee's role in the matter. This paragraph should describe the employee's role in the particular matter, such as their very specific duties, and include any limitations on the types of activities that they can engage in. We will be discussing limitations in greater detail later on in this presentation. While limiting the level of participation that an employee may engage in does not affect whether they would normally be disqualified from participating in a particular matter, these facts may help to mitigate the effect that the employee could realistically have on the disqualifying financial interest and may lower the appearance of impropriety. And that concludes part 1 of our training module on drafting and organizing your 208(b)(1 waiver. Stay tuned for part 2. Welcome to part 2 of our training module on drafting and organizing your B1 waiver. We are going to continue our training with the discussion of the disqualifying financial interest. As you are aware, an employee has a disqualifying financial interest if the particular matter they want to participate in would lead to a potential monetary gain or loss to the employee or another person specified in 18 U.S.C. 208A. The waiver, therefore, should describe both the financial holding or other interest that could be affected by the matter, as well as describing how the particular government matter could affect the interest. So, in this section of the waiver, we want you to first tell us in sufficient detail what the nature of the disqualifying financial interest is. For example, does the employee own stock in a particular company? Do they or their spouse hold a particular position with an outside organization? Or does their spouse own a retirement asset that could experience a monetary gain or loss as a result of government action in a particular matter? As you can see, we have provided some sample language on this slide, but please modify the language as needed so that it fits with your unique fact scenario. In this same paragraph, you want to describe why the employee would be disqualified from participation. Let's take a look at the example we've provided. An employee's spouse has an employment interest with a company. The employee is disqualified from any particular matter that would affect the spouse's employment-related interests. This could include, for example, compensation, continued employment, and possibly investment interests. You should address not only the type of employment-related interest that could be affected by the government matter, for example, a type of compensation like a performance bonus, but how the particular matter, a government contract with the company, for example, could affect the interest. In most instances, a disqualifying financial interest arises because of ownership of certain financial holdings or investments, such as stocks, bonds, or other holdings. However, a disqualifying financial interest can also arise through contractual obligations, employment rights, or even job offers. Because there are so many types of financial interests, the language in this section describing the otherwise disqualifying interest must be detailed and specific. All right, now we are approaching the heart of the waiver, where the agency needs to weigh the facts and other considerations to justify the waiver. The 208B1 analysis is your determination that the financial interest in the matter is not so substantial to affect the integrity of the employee service. How are you arriving at this determination? To do this, you should consider the factors found in 5 CFR 2640-301. These include, among other things, the dollar value of the potential gain or loss that may result from participation in the particular matter, and the nature and importance of the employee's role in the matter, including the extent to which the employee is called upon to exercise discretion in the matter. In discussing the importance of the employee's role in the particular matter, you also want to consider whether there are any mitigating factors that should be included in the waiver. While mitigating factors do not necessarily speak to the substantiality determination under 18 U.S.C. 208b1, they may support the agency's determination by addressing any potential appearance concerns. So, on this slide, we are only providing you with examples of mitigating factors related to the employee's role in the particular matter. These are not the only types of mitigating factors that are available. In fact, there are many different types of mitigating factors that you may want to consider as a justification for your waiver. But here, they are related to the employee's role. A few examples include the employee is not able to make any policy recommendations, or the employee will not be able to exercise any independent authority, or where the employee's participation will be subject to additional layers of oversight as a member of an advisory board or some other multi-layered review process. All right, next up, limitations. While it is important to note limitations early in the waiver, they should be restated and addressed more fully in their own section. Agencies should make it a priority to ensure that the limitations section is written clearly with the view of informing the employee of their legal obligations. As you draft your waiver, you may also want to use this section to highlight additional limitations or monitoring requirements that did not fit in other areas of the waiver. These additional considerations may include limitations on fundraising or lobbying activities, or reminders that other statutory restrictions, such as limitations on representational services under 18 U.S.C. 203 and 205, still apply, or other limitations that are tailored to the specific situation. It is also recommended that agencies consider including a statement that clearly indicates what participation is actually permitted. It is important to remember that this waiver is for the employee and also the public. So clarity on the contours of the waiver is very helpful. All right, we have arrived at our last section of the waiver, the concluding paragraph. Okay, now we are in the home stretch. Let's talk about the information you should include in your concluding materials. First, when you are drafting your conclusion, keep in mind that the conclusion should reinforce that the waiver is the product of an objective process by highlighting the fact that OGE was made aware of and consulted with during the determination process. The summary should concisely summarize the analysis and outcome of the waiver determination for quick reference. Now, let's discuss the OGE consultation statement. I want to really emphasize an important point about the OGE consultation statement. You cannot use this statement until you have, number one, actually completed your consultation with OGE, and number 2, OGE did not object to the issuance of the waiver. If OGE does not agree with an agency's analysis, that does not mean that the waiver is ineffective. However, OGE's records will indicate that the agency was advised against issuing the waiver, and you will not be able to use this statement in your waiver. The conclusion should also explain that waivers are publicly available under 5 CFR 2640-304. Including this statement provides the employee and the public with appropriate notice of the authorities and limitations under which waivers are made available to the public. The signature block is the last section of your B1 waiver. Here, the appointing official or the individual who has delegated authority, usually the DAO or ADAO, must sign the document attesting to the fact that they believe that the standard of 18 U.S.C. 208b1 has been met and that they are granting the waiver to the requesting employee. Okay, now let's talk about some important things you should remember to do in your waiver and things you should not do. All right, so starting with the do's. Do make sure the employee has not already taken any action on the matter. We recommend being proactive in confirming with the employee that they have not participated. We cannot emphasize enough that waivers are prospective and must be issued before the employee participates. Do submit your waiver timely. Submit with sufficient time before the employee participates. This will also give you enough time to complete your consultation with OGE. Do make it clear what activity is actually permitted. Please remember that the waiver is for the employee, so you should make it clear in the waiver what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. Do write clearly. Remember that waivers are publicly available. Thus, we want waivers to be written clearly so that the public understands how the agency arrived at its conclusion. Not only that, but because the media is increasingly more aware of waivers, they are receiving more attention. This underscores the importance of a clearly written waiver. And do give yourself enough time to be deliberative when drafting your waiver. Agencies should be submitting completed, polished draft waivers. Okay, so here are the things you should not do when it comes to your B1 waiver. Do not issue a waiver for past conduct. Remember, waivers are prospective, forward-looking documents and are not available for past conduct. Do not wait until the last minute to submit your waiver to OGE. Please make sure you are building in enough time to complete your consultation. Do not forget to consult with OGE. Agencies are required to consult with OGE when practicable. And that concludes our training module on drafting 208B1 waivers. Stay tuned for our final training module on B1 waivers, all about what happens to your waiver once it's submitted to OGE. Thank you so much for tuning in.